I listened to a podcast Shannon did a few weeks ago, or a couple of months ago maybe, but it's only just been published. And it's about the verification of rough sleepers. And I'll put a link to it in the description of this video. I would highly recommend you listen to it. I just take my hat off to Shannon for just kind of laying out the argument against verification so politely and yet so persuasively. But listening to it, it just kind of made me reflect a little bit on some kind of wider systemic stuff that's kind of plays into it really. So just to give the context for the video, verification of rough sleepers, when I'm talking about it here, I'm talking about the process whereby someone who is rough sleeping approaches local homelessness services, whether it be the council or whether it be a charity, street outreach team or something. They say, I'm homeless, I'm rough sleeping, can you help me out in some way? And instead of being advised to make a homeless application by a charity or by actually accepting an application, if you approach a council and do that, people are routinely, and it's part of policy, they are advised or they're instructed to go and rough sleep in their rough sleeping spot, and the outreach team will come and see them at night, confirm that they're actually rough sleeping for sure, and then start helping them out. Which, as I say, if a local authority officer says that to you, go and rough sleep before you can get help, that's definitely gatekeeping. And a cynic would say that local authorities pay a lot of money to street outreach teams to keep homeless people at arm's length, because the way the duties work, essentially as soon as a homeless person comes into contact with the council, in many cases that will just immediately result in a homeless application being triggered anyway. And so by putting charities who don't have these legal duties in the middle between homeless people and the council, councils effectively save money. So yeah, that's kind of, as a little bit of an aside. So in this podcast, you've got Homeless Link who's hosting it. Homeless Link, by the way, are kind of an umbrella charity. They're a membership charity. They kind of support local authorities and charities, probably some other people as well. They're very kind of, central London based and so on. There's a huge amount of really good information on the website. There's also what I would consider to be a bit concerning things. They do appear to have supported the verification process for many years, and kind of were instrumental in it kind of playing out. But the issue is, firstly, as I said, it's potentially unlawful to do this stuff anyway. But secondly, and arguably more important, I don't know, you're essentially starting a relationship with someone who's probably been badly let down by multiple services over many years. You're starting that relationship by saying, I don't believe you, go prove it before we'll help you out. And I think that's the kind of bit that, a lot of people who've actually rough slept, that's the bit that kind of really grates with them. And so you had Homeless Link hosting it, you had a team leader from a street outreach team who seemed very decent. She wasn't vehemently defending it or anything like that, she was acknowledging their issues with it. But one of the things that I found interesting was that she justified verification of rough sleepers in a rather interesting way. She said something like, and I'm kind of hopefully kind of accurately quoting this, so it's paraphrasing it. She basically said something like, the verification framework in effect puts boundaries in place which makes it safe and kind of manageable for workers to kind of work in the sector. And I don't think necessarily she's talking about physical safety here, because I don't see how it would help your physical safety of your staff, but more around things like burnout and just kind of how staff members cope with what is a very difficult job. And that essentially puts, if that's true and if that's widespread, then that essentially puts a conflict of interest in place, because you are no longer prioritising the needs of people who are sleeping rough, you are prioritising the needs of your staff. And in one sense, that's probably actually a legal requirement. As an employer, that's probably what you have to do. But it just made me think there is perhaps another layer to homelessness, the homelessness sector, the ending of homelessness, which I hadn't really thought about before. Because I've often, as you probably tell, I think in black and white terms a lot of the time. I think that's a good thing personally. I think it's an effective way of working, but that's another issue. And I will think about homelessness as an adversarial issue between councils and homeless people. There's, by definition, the way the law works is adversarial. There's no way around that. And so you've got two sides, and that kind of causes lots of problems, obviously, because homeless people aren't very well equipped necessarily to argue complicated legal cases. But this podcast made me just kind of, I probably realised it a little bit already, but just kind of made me just think clearly about the fact that there's actually more than two sides involved in this homelessness sector, and that adds additional complication to ending homelessness, working together. We talk a lot about, partnership working. Personally, when I hear a chief executive of a charity going on about how well they partnership work with the council, it's a big red flag, because it just basically, for me, it's code saying we don't challenge the council around their perverse decisions. But as I say, maybe I'm wrong about that. But there's this, this kind of additional complication, and for me as a worker, by the way, just to say, when I worked back at the night shelter 20 years ago, and started my pathway into this sector, that was absolutely true. We absolutely, and I've done videos about this, kind of saying how there's that conflict of interest. You're managing a house full of lots of people, lots of different needs. It's completely unsuitable by definition of how you set the project up, and so you are regularly barring people, evicting people, whatever, for pretty lame rules, basically. And so there's that kind of there's that kind of whose side are you on is a kind of question which I've asked for a long time. But this additional side that potentially, if I'm right about this, if there is an additional side, or at least one more side in this sector, fighting over funding and kind of potentially missing opportunities to end homelessness, it does kind of raise that question of whose side are you on. If you work in the sector, whose side are you on? In my mind, and this is I kind of believe this pretty strongly, really, you should be on the homeless person's side. You should be maximising their rights, you should be maximising their housing options. To do that, you will have to have fights with people, metaphorical fights. You have to battle with council around perverse gatekeeping, perverse decisions and so on. And if you are a charity worker, there's this conflict of interest which basically says if you challenge the council, you potentially put the relationship with your organisation at stake, and that for me causes huge deep-seated issues. It basically completely conceals the true cause of homelessness, which is lack of housing, lack of effective services, and it puts the blame onto the homeless person, and it kind of leaves them, ostracises them, excludes them from what's going on, and sets them up as the enemy. So I don't really know what the point of me recording this video is. It's just something that kind of, as I say, occurred to me when I watched the podcast or listened to the podcast. And I don't know what the answer is, because, as I say, you're putting your job at risk if you're willing, if you're going to go and stick up for a homeless person. In many situations, you're putting your job at risk explicitly, because you'll be going against the hierarchy. And so I don't know exactly what your options are. Certainly my experience is I whistle blew, set up a charity to kind of fight it, really. But that's quite an extreme way of doing it. And so, I just wonder if there's maybe a better way, if enough people were to kind of raise the issue. Verification is a good kind of way of doing this, actually. Verification is a good issue to fight on, because I think if you ask anyone in the sector, whether they be in central government or Homelessness or whatever, they probably say, this is really flawed a way of working, and maybe we can kind of get kind of improvements that way. Personally, probably not is my answer to that, but it's an option, I guess. So as I say, interested to know what you think about all this stuff, really. Whether you think I'm flat out wrong, I'm probably going to do a video about somewhere about just making the point that gatekeeping, whether you're a council officer and you're gatekeeping someone, or if you're a charity worker and you're either colluding with gatekeeping, like the verification of rough sleeping, or you're failing to challenge what is obviously really bad decisions, then that is a lifestyle choice. In much kind of more accurate way than dismissing homelessness as a lifestyle choice. If you're a worker who is deciding to continue to get paid rather than do the right thing, that's a lifestyle choice. And until enough people stop doing that, I think we're never going to see the ending of homelessness.